Why do we go to school? You may say, of course, we go to school to study. School is one of the most important contexts for learning to take place. At school, the dynamic between teachers and students, the teacher-student relationship, always catches our first attention and arouses our great interest. Today, we will explore the encounter, education, through this significant relationship. First of all, let's have a look at a pair of pictures about the ancient time. Who are they? What did they do? What were their relative positions? In the left picture were Confucius and his students. Confucius was the dominant role, since he was the only one sitting behind the table, maybe the podium in ancient time. One student was standing attentively beside the podium, and other two pairs of students might be having some discussion. It's easy for us to recognize the teacher and the students due to their relative positions. But the right picture is a totally different story. We can hardly see any dominant position or role, not to mention the teacher among them. But obviously, there were different camps and they were talking or arguing with one another. The different camps very possibly reflected their different opinions. We may use discipleship to depict the Chinese one and Agon for the Western one. Although the two pictures seem quite ancient, they still can to some extent reflect the major difference in the teacher-student relationship between China and the West of the modern time. Now, let's analyze the two keywords a little bit. According to the Longman Dictionary, disciple means someone who believes in the ideas of a great teacher or leader, especially a religious one. And a discipleship refers to such an identity as a disciple. This kind of teacher-student relationship is similar to father-son relationship. Just as the Chinese saying goes, even if someone is your teacher for only one day, you should regard him like your father for the rest of your life. Besides, the disciples are supposed to stay with the master quite a lot in the daily life, not only in the classroom but also outside the classroom. And they should listen, take notes, and memorize the significant words of his master. This is actually how Analects came into being, collected, organized, and compiled by the disciples of Confucius. By doing so, they honored and passed the superior insights of their teacher and helped themselves and others apply these ideas to life. After interpreting discipleship in China, now let's take a close look at Agon in the West. Agon is an ancient Greek word for what we mean by contest in English. In Greek world, the word also means an action to call for an assembly. The assembly came together to debate, to match pros and cons, to struggle, not fatally but seriously, man against man. The people in the assembly were relatively equal since they came taking different stances. They gathered together not for listening to certain authority, but expressing their ideas logically and persuasively. Agon is an oral communication in a confrontational style, and it enjoyed its popularity in the medieval universities. At that time, students did not have assigned papers or written examinations. All testing was conducted orally by disputations or debate-like examinations, the Agon. Although the Western education has changed its sole focus on Agon in modern time, the oral confrontation is still widely seen in the Western classroom. Do you know these two people? The relationship between them may be the best example of Agon. Yes, there were Plato and Aristotle, a famous teacher and a famous student. Aristotle spent almost 20 years being together with his teacher and learning from him. Those years exerted great influence on him and made him an influential giant as his teacher. Did he behave as Confucius' disciples? No, he didn't worship authority, and he had some different views from his teacher in philosophy, even when learning from him. Some of Aristotle's views even contrast with his teachers. Take their different views on the origin of country as an example. Plato supported social division, but Aristotle thought the human nature was the driving force. Since this question is not our focus today, I will not go down deep into it. When it comes to any cultural comparison, we shouldn't oversimplify it or overgeneralize it. But sometimes the stereotyped idea may help us grasp the major difference very quickly and pave the way for further learning about the issue. Of course, we should be aware of the limitation and the risk of this approach. Now, let's have a look at another pair of pictures. Which one do you think stands for the Chinese situation and which one stands for Western situation? It may now be difficult to associate the right one with China and the left one with the West. Why? According to their different ways of hands up, the gesture of the Western student is stretching out, more outward and more relaxing. In comparison, the gesture of the Chinese student looks more disciplined and more enclosed. With reference to the two pictures, discipleship and Agon, these two Asian concepts may still make some sense in the modern context. Chinese students respect their teachers as authority. They listen to their teachers carefully and memorize the knowledge passed on from their teachers. Sometimes they are reluctant to express their different opinions, especially in public, for fear this open disagreement may put both their teachers and themselves into awkward situation. On the contrary, the Western students are more eager to express, and the power distance between the students and the teachers is not as large as that between Chinese students and their teachers. They don't feel much obliged to agree with the teachers or pass on the knowledge exactly. This reminds me of a teacher of my 7-year-old son. She once said the first grader had to learn many rules at school. One of the rules is, when you want to ask or answer questions, raise your hand, and not your right hand but left hand, because you are busy using your right hand to take notes. To be honest, I was shocked hearing this, and couldn't help thinking about why such a rule can exist in China's classroom. Where is the Agon spirit in China's education? What are the advantages and disadvantages of discipleship and Agon respectively?